hypochondriac turn, at least, so many said, yet the language struck him as too much drawn out, so, after consultation with old Prudence, he decided upon making use of the epitaph, yet not without verbal retrenchments. And though, when these were made, the thing still appeared wordy to him, nevertheless, thinking that, since a dead man was to be spoken about, it was but just to let him speak for himself, especially when he spoke sincerely, and when, by so doing, the more salutary lesson would be given, he had the retrenched inscription chiseled as follows upon the stone: Here lie the remains of China Aster the candle maker, whose career was an example of the truth of Scripture, as found in the sober philosophy of Solomon the Wise, for he was ruined by allowing himself to be persuaded, against his better sense, into the free indulgence of confidence, and an ardently bright view of life, to the exclusion of that counsel which comes by heeding the opposite view. This inscription raised some talk in the town, and was rather severely criticized by the capitalist, one of a very cheerful turn, who had secured his loan to China Aster by the mortgage, and though it also proved obnoxious to the man who, in town meeting, had first moved for the compliment to China Aster's memory, and, indeed, was deemed by him a sort of slur upon the candle-maker, to that degree that he refused to believe that the candle-maker himself had composed it, charging Old Plain Talk with the authorship, alleging that the internal evidence showed that none but that veteran old croaker could have penned such a jeremiad, yet, for all this, the stone stood. In everything, of course, Old Plain Talk was seconded by Old Prudence, who, one day going to the graveyard, in greatcoat and overshoes, for, though it was a sunshiny morning, he thought that, owing to heavy dews, dampness might lurk in the ground, long stood before the stone, sharply leaning over on his staff, spectacles on nose, spelling out the epitaph word by word, and, afterwards meeting Old Plain Talk in the street, gave a great rap with his stick, and said, "Friend, Plain Talk, that epitaph will do very well. Nevertheless, one short sentence is wanting." Upon which, Plain Talk said it was too late, the chiseled words being so arranged, after the usual manner of such inscriptions, that nothing could be interlined. Then said Old Prudence, "I will put it in the shape of a postscript." Accordingly, with the approbation of Old Plain Talk, he had the following words chiseled at the left-hand corner of the stone, and pretty low down: "The root of all was a friendly loan." Chapter XLI. Ending with a rupture of the hypothesis. "With what heart," cried Frank, still in character, "have you told me this story? A story I can no way approve, for its moral, if accepted, would drain me of all reliance upon my last stay, and, therefore, of my last courage in life. For, what was that bright view of China Aster but a cheerful trust that, if he but kept up a brave heart, worked hard, and ever hoped for the best, all at last would go well? If your purpose, Charlie, in telling me this story, was to pain me, and keenly, you have succeeded, but, if it was to destroy my last confidence, I praise God you have not." "Confidence," cried Charlie, who, on his side, seemed with his whole heart to enter into the spirit of the thing. What has confidence to do with the matter? That moral of the story, which I am for commending to you, is this: the folly, on both sides, of a friend's helping a friend. For was not that loan of Orchis to China Aster the first step towards their estrangement? And did it not bring about what in effect was the enmity of Orchis? I tell you, Frank, true friendship, like other precious things, is not rashly to be meddled with. And what more meddlesome between friends than a loan? A regular marplot. For how can you help that the helper must turn out a creditor? And creditor and friend, can they ever be one? No, not in the most lenient case, since, out of lenity to forego one's claim, is less to be a friendly creditor than to cease to be a creditor at all. But it will not do to rely upon this lenity, no, not in the best man, for the best man, as the worst, is subject to all mortal contingencies. He may travel, he may marry, he may join the come-outers, or some equally untoward school or sect, not to speak of other things that more or less tend to newcast the character. And were there nothing else, who shall answer for his digestion, upon which so much depends? But Charlie, dear Charlie, nay, wait. You have hearkened to my story in vain, if you do not see that, however indulgent and right-minded I may seem to you now, that is no guarantee for the future. And into the power of that uncertain personality which, through the mutability of my humanity, I may hereafter become, should not common sense dissuade you, my dear Frank, from putting yourself? Consider. Would you, in your present need, be willing to accept a loan from a friend, securing him by a mortgage on your homestead, and do so, knowing that you had no reason to feel satisfied that the mortgage might not eventually be transferred into the hands of a foe? Yet the difference between this man and that man is not so great as the difference between what the same man be today and what he may be in days to come. For there is no bent of heart or turn of thought which any man holds by virtue of an unalterable nature or will. Even those feelings and opinions deemed most identical with eternal right and truth, it is not impossible but that, as personal persuasions, they may in reality be but the result of some chance tip of fate's elbow in throwing her dice. For, not to go into the first seeds of things, and passing by the accident of parentage predisposing to this or that habit of mind, descend below these, and tell me, if you change this man's experiences or that man's books, will wisdom go surety for his unchanged convictions? As particular food begets particular dreams, so particular experiences or books particular feelings or beliefs. I will hear nothing of that fine babble about development and its laws. There is no development in opinion and feeling but the developments of time and tide. You may deem all this talk idle, Frank, but conscience bids me show you how fundamental the reasons for treating you as I do. But Charlie, dear Charlie, what new notions are these? I thought that man was no poor drifting weed of the universe, as you phrased it, that, if so minded, he could have a will, a way, a thought, and a heart of his own. But now you have turned everything upside down again. with an inconsistency that amazes and shocks me. Inconsistency. Bah! There speaks the ventriloquist again, sighed Frank, in bitterness. Illy pleased, it may be, by this repetition of an allusion little flattering to his originality, however much so to his docility, the disciple sought to carry it off by exclaiming, "Yes, I turn over day and night, with indefatigable pains, the sublime pages of my master, and unfortunately for you, my dear friend, I find nothing there that leads me to think otherwise than I do. But enough, in this matter the experience of China Aster teaches a moral more to the point than anything Mark Winsome can offer, or I either. I cannot think so, Charlie, for neither am I China Aster, nor do I stand in his position. The loan to China Aster was to extend his business with, the loan I seek is to relieve my necessities. Your dress, my dear Frank, is respectable, your cheek is not gaunt. Why talk of necessities when nakedness and starvation beget the only real necessities? But I need relief, Charlie, and so sorely, that I now conjure you to forget that I was ever your friend, while I apply to you only as a fellow being, whom, surely, you will not turn away. That I will not. Take off your hat, bow over to the ground, and supplicate an alms of me in the way of London streets, and you shall not be a sturdy beggar in vain. But no man drops pennies into the hat of a friend, let me tell you. If you turn beggar, then, for the honor of noble friendship, I turn stranger. Enough, cried the other, rising, and with a toss of his shoulders seeming disdainfully to throw off the character he had assumed. Enough. I have had my fill of the philosophy of Mark Winsome as put into action. And moonshiny as it in theory may be, yet a very practical philosophy it turns out in effect, as he himself engaged I should find. But, miserable for my race should I be, if I thought he spoke truth when he claimed, for proof of the soundness of his system, that the study of it tended to much the same formation of character with the experiences of the world. Apt disciple. Why wrinkle the brow, and waste the oil both of life and the lamp, only to turn out a head kept cool by the under ice of the heart? What your illustrious Magian has taught you, any poor, old, broken down, heart-shrunken dandy might have lisped. Pray, leave me, and with you take the last dregs of your inhuman philosophy. And here, take this shilling, and at the first wood landing buy yourself a few chips to warm the frozen natures of you and your philosopher by. With these words and a grand scorn the cosmopolitan turned on his heel, leaving his companion at a loss to determine where exactly the fictitious character had been dropped, and the real one, if any, resumed. If any, because, with pointed meaning, there occurred to him, as he gazed after the cosmopolitan, these familiar lines: all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players, who have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. Chapter XLII. Upon the heel of the last scene the cosmopolitan enters the barber's shop, a benediction on his lips. Bless you, barber. Now, owing to the lateness of the hour, The barber had been all alone until within the 10 minutes last past, when, finding himself rather dullish company to himself, he thought he would have a good time with Souter John and Tam O'Shanter, otherwise called Somnus and Morpheus, two very good fellows, though one was not very bright, and the other an arrant rattle-brain, who, though much listened to by some, no wise man would believe under oath. In short, with back presented to the glare of his lamps, and so to the door, the honest barber was taking what are called cat-naps, and dreaming in his chair, so that, upon suddenly hearing the benediction above, pronounced in tones not unangelic, starting up, half awake, he stared before him, but saw nothing, for the stranger stood behind. What with cat-naps, dreams, and bewilderments, therefore, the voice seemed a sort of spiritual manifestation to him, so that, for the moment, he stood all agape, eyes fixed, and one arm in the air. "Why, barber, are you reaching up to catch birds there with salt?" "Ah," turning round disenchanted, "it is only a man, then." "Only a man?" As if to be but a man were nothing. "But don't be too sure what I am. You call me man, just as the townsfolk called the angels who, in man's form, came to Lot's house, just as the Jew rustics called the devils who, in man's form, haunted the tombs. You can conclude nothing absolute from the human form, barber." "But I can conclude something from that sort of talk, with that sort of dress," shrewdly thought the barber, eyeing him with regained self-possession, and not without some latent touch of apprehension at being alone with him. What was passing in his mind seemed divined by the other, who now, more rationally and gravely, and as if he expected it should be attended to, said, "Whatever else you may conclude upon, it is my desire that you conclude to give me a good shave, at the same time loosening his neckcloth." "Are you competent to a good shave, barber?" "No broker more so, sir," answered the barber, whom the business-like proposition instinctively made confined to business ends his views of the visitor. "Broker? What has a broker to do with lather?" "A broker I have always understood to be a worthy dealer in certain papers and metals." He, taking him now for some dry sort of joker, whose jokes, he being a customer, it might be as well to appreciate, he. "You understand well enough, sir. Take this seat, sir," laying his hand on a great stuffed chair, high-backed and high-armed, crimson-covered, and raised on a sort of dais, and which seemed but to lack a canopy and quarterings, to make it in aspect quite a throne. "Take this seat, sir." "Thank you, sitting down, and now, pray, explain that about the broker. But look, what's this?" suddenly rising, and pointing, with his long pipe, towards a gilt notification swinging among colored fly papers from the ceiling, like a tavern sign, "No trust." "No trust means distrust, distrust means no confidence." Barber turning upon him excitedly, "What fell suspiciousness prompts this scandalous confession?" "My life," stamping his foot, "if but to tell a dog that you have no confidence in him be matter for affront to the dog, what an insult to take that way the whole haughty race of man by the beard. By my heart, sir. But at least you are valiant, backing the spleen of the Scythes with the pluck of Agamemnon. Your sort of talk, sir, is not exactly in my line, said the barber, rather ruefully, being now again hopeless of his customer, and not without return of uneasiness. Not in my line, sir, he emphatically repeated. But the taking of mankind by the nose is a habit, barber, which I sadly fear has insensibly bred in you a disrespect for man. For how, indeed, may respectful conceptions of him coexist with the perpetual habit of taking him by the nose? But, tell me, though I, too, clearly see the import of your notification, I do not, as yet, perceive the object. What is it? Now you speak a little in my line, sir, said the barber, not unrelieved at this return to plain talk. That notification I find very useful, sparing me much work which would not pay. Yes, I lost a good deal, off and on, before putting that up, gratefully glancing towards it. But what is its object? Surely, you don't mean to say, in so many words, that you have no confidence. For instance, now flinging aside his neckcloth, throwing back his blouse, and reseating himself on the tonsorial throne, at sight of which proceeding the barber mechanically filled a cup with hot water from a copper vessel over a spirit lamp. For instance, now, suppose I say to you, barber, my dear barber, unhappily I have no small change by me tonight, but shave me, and depend upon your money tomorrow. Suppose I should say that now, you would put trust in me, wouldn't you? You would have confidence. Seeing that it is you, sir, with complaisance replied the barber, now mixing the lather. Seeing that it is you, sir, I won't answer that question. No need to. Of course, in that view. But, as a supposition, you would have confidence in me, wouldn't you? Why, yes. Then why that sign? Ah, sir, all people ain't like you, was the smooth reply, at the same time, as if smoothly to close the debate, beginning smoothly to apply the lather, which operation, however, was, by a motion, protested against by the subject, but only out of a desire to rejoin, which was done in these words, all people ain't like me. Then I must be either better or worse than most people. Worse, you could not mean, no, barber, you could not mean that, hardly that. It remains, then, that you think me better than most people. But that I ain't vain enough to believe, though, from vanity, I confess, I could never yet, by my best wrestlings, entirely free myself, nor, indeed, to be frank, am I at bottom over anxious to, this same vanity, barber, being so harmless, so useful, so comfortable, so pleasingly preposterous a passion. Very true, sir, and upon my honor, sir, you talk very well. But the lather is getting a little cold, sir. Better cold lather, barber, than a cold heart. Why that cold sign? Ah, I don't wonder you try to shirk the confession. You feel in your soul how ungenerous a hint is there. And yet, barber, now that I look into your eyes, which somehow speak to me of the mother that must have so often looked into them before me, I dare say, though you may not think it, that the spirit of that notification is not one with your nature. For look now, setting business views aside, regarding the thing in an abstract light, in short, supposing a case, Barber, supposing, I say, you see a stranger, his face accidentally averted, but his visible part very respectable looking, what now, Barber, I put it to your conscience, to your charity, what would be your impression of that man, in a moral point of view? Being in a signal sense a stranger, would you, for that, signally set him down for a knave? Certainly not, sir, by no means, cried the barber, humanely resentful. You would upon the face of him, hold, sir, said the barber, nothing about the face, you remember, sir, that is out of sight. I forgot that. Well then, you would, upon the back of him, conclude him to be, not improbably, some worthy sort of person, in short, an honest man, wouldn't you? Not unlikely I should, sir. Well now, don't be so impatient with your brush, Barber. Suppose that honest man meet you by night in some dark corner of the boat where his face would still remain unseen, asking you to trust him for a shave, how then? Wouldn't trust him, sir. But is not an honest man to be trusted? Why, yes, sir. There, don't you see, now? See what? Asked the disconcerted barber, rather vexedly. Why, you stand self-contradicted, Barber, don't you? No, doggedly. Barber gravely, and after a pause of concern, the enemies of our race have a saying that insincerity is the most universal and inveterate vice of man, the lasting bar to real amelioration, whether of individuals or of the world. Don't you now, Barber, by your stubbornness on this occasion, give color to such a calumny? Hittitity, cried the barber, losing patience, and with it respect, stubbornness. Then clattering round the brush in the cup, will you be shaved, or won't you? Barber, I will be shaved, and with pleasure, but, pray, don't raise your voice that way. Why, now, if you go through life gritting your teeth in that fashion, what a comfortless time you will have. I take as much comfort in this world as you or any other man, cried the barber, whom the other's sweetness of temper seemed rather to exasperate than soothe. To resent the imputation of anything like unhappiness I have often observed to be peculiar to certain orders of men, said the other pensively, and half to himself, just as to be indifferent to that imputation, from holding happiness but for a secondary good and inferior grace, I have observed to be equally peculiar to other kinds of men. Pray, Barber, innocently looking up, which think you is the superior creature? All this sort of talk, cried the barber, still unmollified, is, as I told you once before, not in my line. In a few minutes I shall shut up this shop. Will you be shaved? Shave away, Barber. What hinders, turning up his face like a flower? The shaving began, and proceeded in silence, till at length it became necessary to prepare to relather a little, affording an opportunity for resuming the subject, which, on one side, was not let slip. Barber with a kind of cautious kindliness, feeling his way. Barber, now have a little patience with me, do, trust me, I wish not to offend. I have been thinking over that supposed case of the man with the averted face, and I cannot rid my mind of the impression that, by your opposite replies to my questions at the time, you showed yourself much of a piece with a good many other men, that is, you have confidence, and then again, you have none. Now, what I would ask is, do you think it sensible standing for a sensible man, one foot on confidence and the other on suspicion? Don't you think, Barber, that you ought to elect? Don't you think consistency requires that you should either say I have confidence in all men and take down your notification, or else say, I suspect all men and keep it up? This dispassionate, if not deferential, way of putting the case, did not fail to impress the barber, and proportionately conciliate him. Likewise, from its pointedness, it served to make him thoughtful, for, instead of going to the copper vessel for more water, as he had purposed, he halted halfway towards it, and, after a pause, cup in hand, said, Sir, I hope you would not do me injustice. I don't say, and can't say, and wouldn't say, that I suspect all men, but I do say that strangers are not to be trusted, and so pointing up to the sign, No Trust. But look, now, I beg, Barber rejoined the other deprecatingly, not presuming too much upon the barber's changed temper, look, now, to say that strangers are not to be trusted, does not that imply something like saying that mankind is not to be trusted, for the mass of mankind, are they not necessarily strangers to each individual man? Come, come, my friend winningly, you are no Timon to hold the mass of mankind untrustworthy. Take down your notification, it is misanthropical, much the same sign that Timon traced with charcoal on the forehead of a skull stuck over his cave. Take it down, Barber, take it down tonight. Trust men. Just try the experiment of trusting men for this one little trip. Come now, I'm a philanthropist, and will insure you against losing a cent. The barber shook his head dryly, and answered, Sir, you must excuse me. I have a family. Chapter XLII Very charming. So you are a philanthropist, sir, added the barber with an illuminated look. That accounts, then, for all. Very odd sort of man the philanthropist. You are the second one, sir, I have seen. Very odd sort of man, indeed, the philanthropist. Ah, sir, again meditatively stirring in the shaving cup, I sadly fear, lest you philanthropists know better what goodness is, than what men are. Then, eyeing him as if he were some strange creature behind cage bars, so you are a philanthropist, sir. I am philanthropo, and love mankind. And, what is more than you do, barber, I trust them. Here the barber, casually recalled to his business, would have replenished his shaving cup, but finding now that on his last visit to the water vessel he had not replaced it over the lamp, he did so now, and, while waiting for it to heat again, became almost as sociable as if the heating water were meant for whiskey punch, and almost as pleasantly garrulous as the pleasant barbers in romances. "Sir," said he, taking a throne beside his customer, for in a row there were 3 thrones on the dais, as for the 3 kings of Cologne, those patron saints of the barber. "Sir, you say you trust men. Well, I suppose I might share some of your trust, were it not for this trade, that I follow, too much letting me in behind the scenes. I think I understand," with a saddened look, "and much the same thing I have heard from persons in pursuits different from yours, from the lawyer, from the congressman, from the editor, not to mention others, each, with a strange kind of melancholy vanity, claiming for his vocation the distinction of affording the surest inlets to the conviction that man is no better than he should be. All of which testimony, if reliable, would, by mutual corroboration, justify some disturbance in a good man's mind. But no, no, it is a mistake, all a mistake." "True, sir, very true," assented the barber. "Glad to hear that," brightening up. "Not so fast, sir," said the barber. "I agree with you in thinking that the lawyer, and the congressman, and the editor, are in error, but only in so far as each claims peculiar facilities for the sort of knowledge in question, because, you see, sir, the truth is, that every trade or pursuit which brings one into contact with the facts, sir, such trade or pursuit is equally an avenue to those facts." "How exactly is that?" "Why, sir, in my opinion, and for the last 20 years I have, at odd times, turned the matter over some in my mind, he who comes to know man, will not remain in ignorance of man. I think I am not rash in saying that, am I, sir?" "Barber, you talk like an oracle, obscurely, barber, obscurely." "Well, sir, with some self-complacency, the barber has always been held an oracle, but as for the obscurity, that I don't admit. But pray, now, by your account, what precisely may be this mysterious knowledge gained in your trade? I grant you, indeed, as before hinted, that your trade, imposing on you the necessity of functionally tweaking the noses of mankind, is, in that respect, unfortunate, very much so. Nevertheless, a well-regulated imagination should be proof even to such a provocation to improper conceits. But what I want to learn from you, barber, is, how does the mere handling of the outside of men's heads lead you to distrust the inside of their hearts? What, sir, to say nothing more, can one be forever dealing in macassar oil, hair dyes, cosmetics, false moustaches, wigs, and toupies, and still believe that men are wholly what they look to be? What think you, sir, are a thoughtful barber's reflections, when, behind a careful curtain, he shaves the thin, dead stubble off a head, and then dismisses it to the world, radiant in curling auburn? To contrast the shamefaced air behind the curtain, the fearful looking forward to being possibly discovered there by a prying acquaintance, with the cheerful assurance and challenging pride with which the same man steps forth again, a gay deception, into the street, while some honest, shock-headed fellow humbly gives him the wall. Ah, sir, they may talk of the courage of truth, but my trade teaches me that truth sometimes is sheepish. Lies, lies, sir, brave lies are the lions. You twist the moral, barber, you sadly twist it. Look, now, take it this way, a modest man thrust out naked into the street, would he not be abashed? Take him in and clothe him, would not his confidence be restored? And in either case, is any reproach involved? Now, what is true of the whole, holds proportionably true of the part. The bald head is a nakedness which the wig is a coat to. To feel uneasy at the possibility of the exposure of one's nakedness at top, and to feel comforted by the consciousness of having it clothed, these feelings, instead of being dishonorable to a bold man, do, in fact, but attest a proper respect for himself and his fellows. And as for the deception, you may as well call the fine roof of a fine chateau a deception, since, like a fine wig, it also is an artificial cover to the head, and equally, in the common eye, decorates the wearer. I have confuted you, my dear barber, I have confounded you. Pardon, said the barber, but I do not see that you have. His coat and his roof no man pretends to palm off as a part of himself, but the bald man palms off hair, not his, for his own. Not his, barber. If he have fairly purchased his hair, the law will protect him in its ownership, even against the claims of the head on which it grew. But it cannot be that you believe what you say, barber, you talk merely for the humor. I could not think so of you as to suppose that you would contentedly deal in the impostures you condemn. Ah, sir, I must live. And can't you do that without sinning against your conscience, as you believe? Take up some other calling. Wouldn't mend the matter much, sir. Do you think, then, barber, that, in a certain point, all the trades and callings of men are much on a par? Fatal, indeed, raising his hand, inexpressibly dreadful, the trade of the barber, if to such conclusions it necessarily leads. Barbaring him not without emotion, you appear to me not so much a misbeliever, as a man misled. Now, let me set you on the right track, let me restore you to trust in human nature, and by no other means than the very trade that has brought you to suspect it. You mean, sir, you would have me try the experiment of taking down that notification again, pointing to it with his brush, but, dear me, while I sit chatting here, the water boils over. With which words, and such a well-pleased, sly, snug expression, as they say some men have when they think their little stratagem has succeeded, he hurried to the copper vessel, and soon had his cup foaming up with white bubbles, as if it were a mug of new ale. Meantime, the other would have fain gone on with the discourse, but the cunning barber lathered him with so generous a brush, so piled up the foam on him, that his face looked like the yeasty crest of a billow, and vain to think of talking under it, as for a drowning priest in the sea to exhort his fellow sinners on a raft. Nothing would do, but he must keep his mouth shut. Doubtless, the interval was not, in a meditative way, unimproved, for, upon the traces of the operation being at last removed, the cosmopolitan rose, and, for added refreshment, washed his face and hands, and having generally readjusted himself, began, at last, addressing the barber in a manner different, singularly so, from his previous one. Hard to say exactly what the manner was, any more than to hint it was a sort of magical, in a benign way, not wholly unlike the manner, fabled or otherwise, of certain creatures in nature, which have the power of persuasive fascination, the power of holding another creature by the button of the eye, as it were, despite the serious disinclination, and, indeed, earnest protest, of the victim. With this manner the conclusion of the matter was not out of keeping, for, in the end, all argument and expostulation proved vain, the barber being irresistibly persuaded to agree to try, for the remainder of the present trip, the experiment of trusting men, as both phrased it. True, to save his credit as a free agent, he was loud in averring that it was only for the novelty of the thing that he so agreed, and he required the other, as before volunteered, to go security to him against any loss that might ensue, but still the fact remained, that he engaged to trust men, a thing he had before said he would not do, at least not unreservedly. Still the more to save his credit, he now insisted upon it, as a last point, that the agreement should be put in black and white, especially the security part. The other made no demur, pen, ink, and paper were provided, and grave as any notary the cosmopolitan sat down, but, ere taking the pen, glanced up at the notification, and said, "First down with that sign, Barber, Timon's sign, there, down with it." This, being in the agreement, was done, though a little reluctantly, with an eye to the future, the sign being carefully put away in a drawer. "Now, then, for the writing," said the cosmopolitan, squaring himself. "Ah," with a sigh, "I shall make a poor lawyer, I fear. Ain't used, you see, Barber, to a business which, ignoring the principle of honor, holds no nail fast till clinched. Strange, Barber taking up the blank paper, that such flimsy stuff as this should make such strong horses, vile horses, too." Barber starting up, "I won't put it in black and white. It were a reflection upon our joint honor. I will take your word, and you shall take mine. But your memory may be none of the best, sir. Well for you, on your side, to have it in black and white, just for a memorandum like, you know. That, indeed. Yes, and it would help your memory, too, wouldn't it, Barber? Yours, on your side, being a little weak, too, I dare say. Ah, Barber! How ingenious we human beings are, and how kindly we reciprocate each other's little delicacies, don't we? What better proof, now, that we are kind, considerate fellows, with responsive fellow feelings, eh, Barber? But to business. Let me see. What's your name, Barber?" "William Cream, sir." Pondering a moment, he began to write, and, after some corrections, leaned back, and read aloud the following: "Agreement between Frank Goodman, philanthropist, and citizen of the world, and William Cream, barber of the Mississippi steamer, Fidel. The first hereby agrees to make good to the last any loss that may come from his trusting mankind, in the way of his vocation, for the residue of the present trip, provided that William Cream keep out of sight, for the given term, his notification of no trust, and by no other mode convey any, the least hint or intimation, tending to discourage men from soliciting trust from him, in the way of his vocation, for the time above specified, but, on the contrary, he do, by all proper and reasonable words, gestures, manners, and looks, evince a perfect confidence in all men, especially strangers, otherwise, this agreement to be void. Done, in good faith, this first day of April 18, at 11:45 p.m., in the shop of said William Cream, on board the said boat, Fidel. There, barber, will that do? That will do, said the barber, only now put down your name. Both signatures being affixed, the question was started by the barber, who should have custody of the instrument, which point, however, he settled for himself, by proposing that both should go together to the captain, and give the document into his hands, the barber hinting that this would be a safe proceeding, because the captain was necessarily a party disinterested, and, what was more, could not, from the nature of the present case, make anything by a breach of trust. All of which was listened to with some surprise and concern. Why, barber, said the Cosmopolitan, this don't show the right spirit. For me, I have confidence in the captain purely because he is a man, but he shall have nothing to do with our affair, for if you have no confidence in me, barber, I have in you. There, keep the paper yourself, handing it magnanimously. Very good, said the barber, and now nothing remains but for me to receive the cash. Though the mention of that word, or any of its singularly numerous equivalents, in serious neighborhood to a requisition upon one's purse, is attended with a more or less noteworthy effect upon the human countenance, producing in many an abrupt fall of it, in others, a writhing and screwing up of the features to a point not undistressing to behold, in some, attended with a blank pallor and fatal consternation, yet no trace of any of these symptoms was visible upon the countenance of the Cosmopolitan, notwithstanding nothing could be more sudden and unexpected than the barber's demand. You speak of cash, barber, pray in what connection? In a nearer one, sir, answered the barber, less blandly than I thought the man with the sweet voice stood, who wanted me to trust him once for a shave, on the score of being a sort of 13th cousin. Indeed, and what did you say to him? I said, thank you, sir, but I don't see the connection. How could you so unsweetly answer one with a sweet voice? Because, I recalled what the son of Sirach says in the true book, an enemy speaketh sweetly with his lips, and so I did what the son of Sirach advises in such cases. I believed not his many words. What, barber, do you say that such cynical sort of things are in the true book, by which, of course, you mean the Bible? Yes, and plenty more to the same effect. Read the book of Proverbs. That's strange, now, barber, for I never happen to have met with those passages you cite. Before I go to bed this night, I'll inspect the Bible I saw on the cabin table, today. But mind, you mustn't quote the true book that way to people coming in here. it would be impliedly a violation of the contract. But you don't know how glad I feel that you have for one while signed off all that sort of thing. No, sir, not unless you down with the cash. Cash again? What do you mean? Why, in this paper here, you engage, sir, to insure me against a certain loss, and, certain. Is it so certain you are going to lose? Why, that way of taking the word may not be amiss, but I didn't mean it so. I meant a certain loss, you understand, a certain loss, that is to say, a certain loss. Now then, sir, what use your mere writing and saying you will insure me, unless beforehand you place in my hands a money pledge, sufficient to that end? I see, the material pledge. Yes, and I will put it low, say $50. Now what sort of a beginning is this? You, barber, for a given time engage to trust man, to put confidence in men, and, for your first step, make a demand implying no confidence in the very man you engage with. But $50 is nothing, and I would let you have it cheerfully, only I unfortunately happen to have but little change with me just now. But you have money in your trunk, though. To be sure. But you see, in fact, barber, you must be consistent. No, I won't let you have the money now, I won't let you violate the inmost spirit of our contract, that way. So good night, and I will see you again. Stay, sir, humming and hawing, you have forgotten something. Handkerchief, gloves. No, forgotten nothing. Good night. Stay, sir, the shaving. Ah, I did forget that. But now that it strikes me, I shan't pay you at present. Look at your agreement, you must trust. Tut. Against loss you hold the guarantee. Good night, my dear barber. With which words he sauntered off, leaving the barber in a maze, staring after. But it holding true in fascination as in natural philosophy, that nothing can act where it is not, so the barber was not long now in being restored to his self-possession and senses, the first evidence of which perhaps was, that, drawing forth his notification from the drawer, he put it back where it belonged, while, as for the agreement, that he tore up, which he felt the more free to do from the impression that in all human probability he would never again see the person who had drawn it. Whether that impression proved well-founded or not, does not appear. But in after days, telling the night's adventure to his friends, the worthy barber always spoke of his queer customer as the man-charmer, as certain East Indians are called snake charmers, and all his friends united in thinking him quite an original. Chapter Xliv, in which the last 3 words of the last chapter are made the text of discourse, which will be sure of receiving more or less attention from those readers who do not skip it. Quite an original a phrase, we fancy, rather oftener used by the young, or the unlearned, or the untravelled, than by the old, or the well-read, or the man who has made the grand tour. Certainly, the sense of originality exists at its highest in an infant, and probably at its lowest in him who has completed the circle of the sciences. As for original characters in fiction, a grateful reader will, on meeting with one, keep the anniversary of that day. True, we sometimes hear of an author who, at one creation, produces some 2 or 3 score such characters. It may be possible. But they can hardly be original in the sense that Hamlet is, or Don Quixote, or Milton's Satan. That is to say, they are not, in a thorough sense, original at all. They are novel, or singular, or striking, or captivating, or all 4 at once. More likely, they are what are called odd characters, but for that, are no more original, than what is called an odd genius, in his way, is. But, if original, whence came they? Or where did the novelist pick them up? Where does any novelist pick up any character? For the most part, in town, to be sure. Every great town is a kind of man-show, where the novelist goes for his stock, just as the agriculturist goes to the cattle show for his. But in the one fair, new species of quadrupeds are hardly more rare, than in the other are new species of characters, that is, original ones. Their rarity may still the more appear from this, that, while characters, merely singular, imply but singular forms, so to speak, original ones, truly so, imply original instincts. In short, a due conception of what is to be held for this sort of personage in fiction would make him almost as much of a prodigy there, as in real history is a new lawgiver, a revolutionizing philosopher, or the founder of a new religion. In nearly all the original characters, loosely accounted such in works of invention, there is discernible something prevailingly local, or of the age, which circumstance, of itself, would seem to invalidate the claim, judged by the principles here suggested. Furthermore, if we consider what is popularly held to entitle characters in fiction to being deemed original, is but something personal, confined to itself. The character sheds not its characteristic on its surroundings, whereas the original character, essentially such, is like a revolving drum on light, raying away from itself all round it. Everything is lit by it, everything starts up to it. Mark how it is with Hamlet, so that, in certain minds, there follows upon the adequate conception of such a character, an effect, in its way, akin to that which in Genesis attends upon the beginning of things. For much the same reason that there is but one planet to one orbit, so can there be but one such original character to one work of invention. Two would conflict to chaos. In this view, to say that there are more than one to a book, is good presumption. There is none at all. But for new, singular, striking, odd, eccentric, and all sorts of entertaining and instructive characters, a good fiction may be full of them. To produce such characters, an author, beside other things, must have seen much, and seen through much. To produce but one original character, he must have had much luck. There would seem but one point in common between this sort of phenomenon in fiction and all other sorts: it cannot be born in the author's imagination, it being as true in literature as in zoology, that all life is from the egg. In the endeavor to show, if possible, the impropriety of the phrase, quite an original, as applied by the barber's friends, we have, at unawares, been led into a dissertation bordering upon the prosy, perhaps upon the smoky. If so, the best use the smoke can be turned to, will be, by retiring under cover of it, in good trim as may be, to the story. Chapter XLV. The Cosmopolitan increases in seriousness. In the middle of the gentleman's cabin burned a solar lamp, swung from the ceiling, and whose shade of ground glass was all round fancifully variegated, in transparency, with the image of a horned altar, from which flames rose, alternate with the figure of a robed man, his head encircled by a halo. The light of this lamp, after dazzlingly striking on marble, snow-white and round, the slab of a centre table beneath, on all sides went rippling off with ever-diminishing distinctness, till, like circles from a stone dropped in water, the rays died dimly away in the furthest nook of the place. Here and there, true to their place, but not to their function, swung other lamps, barren planets, which had either gone out from exhaustion, or been extinguished by such occupants of berths as the light annoyed, or who wanted to sleep, not see. By a perverse man, in a berth not remote, the remaining lamp would have been extinguished as well, had not a steward forbade, saying that the commands of the captain required it to be kept burning till the natural light of day should come to relieve it. This steward, who, like many in his vocation, was apt to be a little free-spoken at times, had been provoked by the man's pertinacity to remind him, not only of the sad consequences which might, upon occasion, ensue from the cabin being left in darkness, but, also, of the circumstance that, in a place full of strangers, to show oneself anxious to produce darkness there, such an anxiety was, to say the least, not becoming. So the lamp, last survivor of many, burned on, inwardly blessed by those in some berths, and inwardly execrated by those in others. Keeping his lone vigils beneath his lone lamp, which lighted his book on the table, sat a clean, comely, old man, his head snowy as the marble, and a countenance like that which imagination ascribes to good Simeon, when, having at last beheld the Master of Faith, he blessed him and departed in peace. From his hale look of greenness in winter, and his hands ingrained with the tan, less, apparently, of the present summer, than of accumulated ones past, the old man seemed a well-to-do farmer, happily dismissed, after a thrifty life of activity, from the fields to the fireside, one of those who, at 70, are fresh-hearted as at 15, to whom seclusion gives a boon more blessed than knowledge, and at last sends them to heaven untainted by the world, because ignorant of it, just as a countryman putting up at a London inn, and never stirring out of it as a sightseer, will leave London at last without once being lost in its fog, or soiled by its mud. Redolent from the barber's shop, as any bridegroom tripping to the bridal chamber might come, and by his look of cheeriness seeming to dispense a sort of mourning through the night, in came the cosmopolitan, but marking the old man, and how he was occupied, he toned himself down, and trod softly, and took a seat on the other side of the table, and said nothing. Still, there was a kind of waiting expression about him. "Sir," said the old man, After looking up puzzled at him a moment, "Sir," said he, "one would think this was a coffee house, and it was wartime, and I had a newspaper here with great news, and the only copy to be had. You sit there looking at me so eager. And so you have good news there, sir, the very best of good news." "Too good to be true," here came from one of the curtained berths. "Hark," said the cosmopolitan. "Someone talks in his sleep." "Yes," said the old man, "and you seem to be talking in a dream." "Why speak you, sir, of news, and all that, when you must see this is a book I have here, the Bible, not a newspaper?" "I know that, and when you are through with it, but not a moment sooner, I will thank you for it. It belongs to the boat, I believe, a present from a society." "Oh, take it, take it." "Nay, sir, I did not mean to touch you at all. I simply stated the fact in explanation of my waiting here, nothing more. Read on, sir, or you will distress me." This courtesy was not without effect. Removing his spectacles, and saying he had about finished his chapter, the old man kindly presented the volume, which was received with thanks equally kind. After reading for some minutes, until his expression merged from attentiveness into seriousness, and from that into a kind of pain, the cosmopolitan slowly laid down the book, and turning to the old man, who thus far had been watching him with benign curiosity, said, "Can you, my aged friend, resolve me a doubt, a disturbing doubt?" "There are doubts, sir," replied the old man, with a changed countenance, "there are doubts, sir, which, if man have them, it is not man that can solve them." "True, but look, now, what my doubt is. I am one who thinks well of man. I love man. I have confidence in man. But what was told me not a half-hour since? I was told that I would find it written, 'Believe not his many words, an enemy speaketh sweetly with his lips,' and also I was told that I would find a good deal more to the same effect, and all in this book. I could not think it, and, coming here to look for myself, what do I read? Not only just what was quoted, but also, as was engaged, more to the same purpose, such as this: 'With much communication he will tempt thee, he will smile upon thee, and speak thee fair, and say what wantest thou. If thou be for his profit he will use thee, he will make thee bear, and will not be sorry for it. Observe and take good heed. When thou hearest these things, awake in thy sleep.'" "Who's that describing the confidence man?" here came from the berth again. "Awake in his sleep, sure enough, ain't he?" said the cosmopolitan, again looking off in surprise. "Same voice as before, ain't it? Strange sort of dreamy man, that. Which is his berth, pray?" "Never mind him, sir," said the old man anxiously, "but tell me truly, did you, indeed, read from the book just now?" "I did, with changed air, and gall and wormwood it is to me, a truster in man, to me, a philanthropist." "Why moved, you don't mean to say, that what you repeated is really down there?" "Man and boy, I have read the good book this 70 years, and don't remember seeing anything like that." Let me see it, rising earnestly, and going round to him. There it is, and there, turning over the leaves, and pointing to the sentences one by one. There, all down in the wisdom of Jesus, the son of Sirach. Ah, cried the old man, brightening up, now I know. Look, turning the leaves forward and back, till all the Old Testament lay flat on one side, and all the New Testament flat on the other, while in his fingers he supported vertically the portion between. Look, sir, all this to the right is certain truth, and all this to the left is certain truth, but all I hold in my hand here is Apocrypha. Apocrypha. Yes, and there's the word in black and white pointing to it. And what says the word? It says as much as not warranted, for what do college men say of anything of that sort? They say it is apocryphal. The word itself, I've heard from the pulpit, implies something of uncertain credit. So if your disturbance be raised from aught in this apocrypha again taking up the pages, in that case, think no more of it, for it's apocrypha. What's that about the apocalypse? Here, a third time, came from the birth. He's seeing visions now, ain't he? Said the cosmopolitan, once more looking in the direction of the interruption. But, sir, resuming, I cannot tell you how thankful I am for your reminding me about the Apocrypha here. For the moment, its being such escaped me. Fact is, when all is bound up together, it's sometimes confusing. The uncanonical part should be bound distinct. And, now that I think of it, how well did those learned doctors who rejected for us this whole book of Sirach. I never read anything so calculated to destroy man's confidence in man. This son of Sirach even says, I saw it but just now, take heed of thy friends, not, observe, thy seeming friends, thy hypocritical friends, thy false friends, but thy friends, thy real friends, that is to say, not the truest friend in the world is to be implicitly trusted. Can Rochefoucauld equal that? I should not wonder if his view of human nature, like Machiavelli's, was taken from this son of Sirach. And to call it wisdom, the wisdom of the son of Sirach. Wisdom, indeed. What an ugly thing wisdom must be. Give me the folly that dimples the cheek, say I, rather than the wisdom that curdles the blood. But no, it ain't wisdom, it's apocrypha, as you say, sir. For how can that be trustworthy that teaches distrust? I tell you what it is here, cried the same voice as before, only more in less of mockery. If you two don't know enough to sleep, don't be keeping wiser men awake. And if you want to know what wisdom is, go find it under your blankets. Wisdom, cried another voice with a brogue, and is wisdom the two geese are gabbling about all this while. To bed with ye, ye devils, and don't be after burning your fingers with the likes of wisdom. We must talk lower, said the old man, I fear we have annoyed these good people. I should be sorry if wisdom annoyed anyone, said the other, but we will lower our voices, as you say. To resume, taking the thing as I did, can you be surprised at my uneasiness in reading passages so charged with the spirit of distrust? No, sir, I am not surprised, said the old man, then added, from what you say, I see you are something of my way of thinking. You think that to distrust the creature is a kind of distrusting of the Creator. Well, my young friend, what is it? This is rather late for you to be about. What do you want of me? These questions were put to a boy in the fragment of an old linen coat, bedraggled and yellow, who, coming in from the deck barefooted on the soft carpet, had been unheard. All pointed and fluttering, the rags of the little fellow's red flannel shirt, mixed with those of his yellow coat, flamed about him like the painted flames in the robes of a victim in auto the Fe. His face, too, wore such a polish of seasoned grime, that his slow eyes sparkled from out it like lustrous sparks in fresh coal. He was a juvenile peddler, or marchand, as the polite French might have called him, of travellers' conveniences, and, having no allotted sleeping place, had, in his wanderings about the boat, spied, through glass doors, the two in the cabin, and, late though it was, thought it might never be too much so for turning a penny. Among other things, he carried a curious affair, a miniature mahogany door, hinged to its frame, and suitably furnished in all respects but one, which will shortly appear. This little door he now meaningly held before the old man, who, after staring at it a while, said, "Go thy ways with thy toys, child. Now, may I never get so old and wise as that," comes to, laughed the boy through his grime, and, by so doing, disclosing leopard-like teeth, like those of Murillo's wild beggar boys. The Devilles are laughing now, are they? Here came the brogue from the berth. What do the Devilles find to laugh about in wisdom, begurra? To bed with ye, ye Devilles, and no more of ye. You see, child, you have disturbed that person, said the old man, you mustn't laugh any more. Ah, now, said the cosmopolitan, don't, pray, say that, don't let him think that poor laughter is persecuted for a fool in this world. Well, said the old man to the boy, you must, at any rate, speak very low. Yes, that wouldn't be amiss, perhaps, said the cosmopolitan, but, my fine fellow, you were about saying something to my aged friend here. What was it? Oh, with a lowered voice, coolly opening and shutting his little door, only this: when I kept a toy stand at the fair in Cincinnati last month, I sold more than one old man a child's rattle. No doubt of it, said the old man. I myself often buy such things for my little grandchildren. But these old men I talk of were old bachelors. The old man stared at him a moment, then, whispering to the cosmopolitan, strange boy, this, sort of simple, ain't he? Don't know much, hey? Not much, said the boy, or I wouldn't be so ragged. Why, child, what sharp ears you have, exclaimed the old man. If they were duller, I would hear less ill of myself, said the boy. You seem pretty wise, my lad, said the cosmopolitan. Why don't you sell your wisdom, and buy a coat? Faith, said the boy, that's what I did today, and this is the coat that the price of my wisdom bought. But won't you trade? See, now, it is not the door I want to sell, I only carry the door round for a specimen, like. Look now, sir, standing the thing up on the table. Supposing this little door is your stateroom door, well, opening it, you go in for the night, you close your door behind you, thus. Now, is all safe? I suppose so, child, said the old man. Of course it is, my fine fellow, said the cosmopolitan. All safe. Well. Now, about 2 o'clock in the morning, say, a soft-handed gentleman comes softly and tries the knob here, thus, in creeps my soft-handed gentleman, and hey, presto! How comes on the soft cash? I see, child, said the old man, your fine gentleman is a fine thief, and there's no lock to your little door to keep him out, with which words he peered at it more closely than before. Well, now, again showing his white teeth, well, now, some of you old folks are knowing uns, sure enough. But now comes the great invention, producing a small steel contrivance, very simple but ingenious, and which, being clapped on the inside of the little door, secured it as with a bolt. They're now admiringly holding it off at arm's length. There now, let that soft-handed gentleman come now, softly trying this little knob here, and let him keep trying till he finds his head as soft as his hand. By the traveller's patent lock, sir, only 25 cents. Dear me, cried the old man, this beats printing. Yes, child, I will have one, and use it this very night. With the phlegm of an old banker pouching the change, the boy now turned to the other. Sell you one, sir? Excuse me, my fine fellow, but I never use such blacksmith's things. Those who give the blacksmith most work seldom do, said the boy, tipping him a wink expressive of a degree of indefinite knowingness, not uninteresting to consider in one of his years. But the wink was not marked by the old man, nor, to all appearances, by him for whom it was intended. Now then, said the boy, again addressing the old man, with your traveller's lock on your door tonight, you will think yourself all safe, won't you? I think I will, child. But how about the window? Dear me, the window, child. I never thought of that. I must see to that. Never you mind about the window, said the boy, nor, to be honor bright, about the traveller's lock either, though I ain't sorry for selling one. Do you just buy one of these little jokers, producing a number of suspender-like objects, which he dangled before the old man. Money belts, sir, only 50 cents. Money belt, never heard of such a thing. A sort of pocketbook, said the boy, only a safer sort. Very good for travelers. Oh, a pocketbook. Queer-looking pocketbooks though, seems to me. Ain't they rather long and narrow for pocketbooks? They go round the waist, sir, inside, said the boy. Door open or locked, wide awake on your feet or fast asleep in your chair, impossible to be robbed with a money belt. I see. It would be hard to rob one's money belt. And I was told today the Mississippi is a bad river for pickpockets. How much are they? Only 50 cents, sir. I'll take one. There. Thank ye. And now there's a present for ye, with which, drawing from his breast a batch of little papers, He threw one before the old man, who, looking at it, read counterfeit detector. "Very good thing," said the boy. "I give it to all my customers who trade 75 cents worth. Best present can be made them." "Sell you a money belt, sir?" turning to the cosmopolitan. "Excuse me, my fine fellow, but I never use that sort of thing. My money I carry loose." "Loose bait ain't bad," said the boy. "Look a lie and find the truth. Don't care about a counterfeit detector, do ye, or is the wind east, do ye think?" "Child," said the old man in some concern, "you mustn't sit up any longer, it affects your mind. There, go away, go to bed." "If I had some people's brains to lie on, I would," said the boy, "but planks is hard, you know." "Go, child, go, go." "Yes, child, yes, yes," said the boy, with which roguish parody, by way of conch, he scraped back his hard foot on the woven flowers of the carpet, much as a mischievous steer-in may scrapes back his horny hoof in the pasture, and then with a flourish of his hat, which, like the rest of his tatters, was, thanks to hard times, a belonging beyond his years, though not beyond his experience, being a grown man's cast-off beaver, turned, and with the air of a young Kaffir, quitted the place. "That's a strange boy," said the old man, looking after him. "I wonder who's his mother, and whether she knows what late hours he keeps." "The probability is," observed the other, "that his mother does not know." "But if you remember, sir, you were saying something, when the boy interrupted you with his door." "So I was. Let me see, unmindful of his purchases for the moment. What, now, was it? What was that I was saying? Do you remember?" "Not perfectly, sir, but, if I am not mistaken, it was something like this: you hoped you did not distrust the creature, for that would imply distrust of the Creator." "Yes, that was something like it." Mechanically and unintelligently letting his eye fall now on his purchase,